So, since Jason is coming to the Fog in a couple of weeks, and also considering that I'm a pretty big Friday the 13th fan, I thought it'd be fun to go over every little Easter egg and reference I could personally find with Jason in Dead by Daylight. And of course, if I miss anything, let me know in the comments down below. But we'll do everything from Jason's cosmetics, his power, his weapons, and even his add-ons, which we'll start with the add-ons first because pretty much every single add-on in Jason's kit references the movies in some way. Like for example, the first two add-ons we're going to talk about, the Orderly's Shoes and the Coroner's Coffee. These two add-ons reference the very beginning of Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter, where Jason rises from the dead in the morgue and kills the coroner guy by cutting his throat with the hacksaw, and then pinning the coroner lady on the wall and stabbing her in the gut. Another add-on that references Part 4 is the Garden Claw, which is the weapon that Jason used to kill Bob Dyer, the guy who was very loudly screaming, "He's killing me! He's killing me!" Next up we have the Knitting Needle, which I did not know what this was referencing when I first saw this add-on, but after a little bit of digging, I figured out this was from Friday the 13th Part 3 at the very beginning of the movie, where Jason trespasses into a store owner's house, steals their clothes, shaves his head, and then takes a knitting needle and stabs the store owner's wife in the back of the head. For our final brown add-on, we have the Bent Wheel, which is a callback to one of the most iconic kills in the entire franchise, the wheelchair machete to face, rolling downhill, lightning rain kill. You know what I'm trying to say. It's that kill from Friday the 13th Part 2. Moving on to our green add-ons, and for our very first one, we have a goofy one in the Toxic Waste. Now, the reason I say it's goofy is because this was one of the weirdest plot devices used in Jason Takes Manhattan. Apparently, in that movie, every night at midnight, New York flushes out the sewers with toxic waste to, I guess, clean it, and this was something used to defeat Jason at the very end of the movie, melting his skin and reducing him to his child form for whatever reason, and Jason said, "Mommy?" It's such a weird plot device, and also Jason dunked somebody into a barrel of toxic waste as well, so I guess you also got that. For our next two add-ons, these both come from Part 7, and that is the Sleeping Bag and the Party Noisemaker. The Sleeping Bag is probably one of the more iconic kills from Jason, where Jason takes somebody in a sleeping bag, traps them in it, and then slams them onto the side of a tree with one hit. And the Party Noisemaker is a kill from later in Part 7, where Jason takes a party horn and shoves it into somebody's skull. Ugh! And it makes a pretty funny noise when it goes in as well. We already did the Coroner's Coffee, but the last green add-on we have is the Bloody Smile, which comes from my favorite movie in the entire franchise, Part 6, Jason Lives. This is also a callback to one of my favorite scenes from this movie, where Jason tries to get a machete out of somebody's hand and throws them a little too hard, rips the guy's arm off, sends him flying across the forest, face first into a tree, and when his face gets off the tree, it shows a nice little smiley face, which logically doesn't really make sense, but it's Jason Lives. It's one of the goofier movies in the franchise. But I like the scene so much because it shows that Jason doesn't quite know his strength just yet. He just got resurrected, he's just realizing his new power, so just from an Easter egg perspective, this is probably one of my favorite add-ons in Jason's kit. Moving on to the blue add-ons, and for our first one we have the Two Nails, which is another add-on I had no idea what it was referencing at first until I obviously looked it up, and it comes from Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter, where after Jason kills Marty McFly's dad, he takes his body and pins his hands onto the side of an open doorway, and then later on in the movie rudely pushes him off the doorway and rips his hands in the process. Ugh, nasty. Next up, we have two add-ons that come from Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, and that is the Sauna Rock and the Mirror Shards. The Sauna Rock was a weapon that Jason used in obviously a sauna room, where somebody's laying down on a bench and Jason takes the rock and shoves it into their chest, and they basically suffocate, boil. I don't know what happened in that scene. I don't know. And the Mirror Shards are from later in the movie, where Jason takes a woman, smacks her head onto a mirror, throws her into the shower, punches the mirror, takes a shard, and while she's cornered in the shower, stabs her like any normal kind of stab. Next up, we have the Imprinted Aluminum, or Aluminium if you're from Europe, and this comes from Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, where Jason takes a woman's face and smacks it on the side of an RV and presses it so hard that it makes an imprint of her face on the wall, which again logically does not make sense, but it's Jason Lives, so we must forgive it. For our final add-on, we have the Eye Goop, which comes from Friday the 13th Part 3, and I personally thought this was referencing the very beginning of the movie with the Harbinger guy, and he's holding an eyeball, and he says, "I warned thee."
I have warned thee.
But no, if you look at the subtext for this add-on, it says, "What remains when a harpoon is shoved into one's eye." So this is referencing later in Part 3 where Jason takes a harpoon gun and shoots somebody in the skull with it. And even though we don't see the Eye Goop, we know it's there. Next up, we have the missing Corkscrew, which comes from Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter, where Marty McFly's dad is looking for the Corkscrew, and Jason, being the ever so nice guy that he is, lends a helping hand.
Ted! Hey, Ted, where the hell's Corkscrew?
Next up, we have the deputy's badge, and I didn't really know where this badge was exactly coming from because there's a couple movies in the franchise that has cop characters involved with the movie, like for example Part 6, Part 8, Jason Goes to Hell, even the remake, but I do think that this is mainly referencing Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, because the cop characters were a very prominent part of that movie, especially that one guy with a laser sight on his pistol.
Wherever the red dot goes, you bang.
Next up, we have the burnt fuse, which also references a pretty iconic kill in the franchise, and that is Chuck's kill, where Jason takes him and throws him to a fuse box, and he is electrocuted and burnt alive. Speaking of Part 3, our next add-on is the Bloody Magazine, and this is a callback to the Debbie kill from Part 3, where she is reading a Fangoria magazine, and then blood starts dripping from the ceiling. She looks up, and it's her boyfriend hanging from the ceiling. After seeing this, Jason grabs her by the head and then stabs her through the hammock. For our final two add-ons, which both come from the same exact movie, Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, we have the Iridescent boat motor and the Dirty Money. We'll start off with the boat motor. This is a reference to the very end of Jason Lives, where Megan is trying to save Tommy from Jason, and Jason grabs her in the process, and the only way she can get out of Jason's grasp is if she turns on the boat motor, turns the blade towards Jason, and then snaps his neck. Post-editing Ducry stepping in for a couple of seconds, I completely forgot that there is a short film, Sweet Revenge, and one of the kills in that short film was Jason using a boat motor to kill somebody, so maybe this add-on references that. I'm not quite sure though. I personally think it's Part 6, but it is a film under Jason Universe, and in the name it says Iridescent, so it has more significance above all the other add-ons, so maybe it's from Sweet Revenge. I'm not quite sure though. And the Dirty Money is a pretty funny one, where a lady tried to pay off Jason to not kill her and leave her alone, and at first Jason actually obliges, but then we remember Jason has no need for money. Moving on to the cosmetics, and yes, I know these are not movie accurate cosmetics, but there are some parts of them that do make references to the movies and even like games and stuff like that, so that's pretty cool. And I won't spend too much time talking about them, I'll kind of like rapid fire through them. But for the first one, we have the Lumberjack Skin. For the weapon, we obviously have the Lumberjack Axe, which is a callback to Part 3, which is one of the main weapons that Jason did use in that movie. He used it to cut somebody in half with it, and the final girl of that movie took his axe and then smacked him in the head with it. You also have the barbed wire wrapped around Jason's arm, which is not a reference to the movies, but it could be a reference to Friday the 13th the game, where Savini Jason had a chain wrapped around his arm. That's all I can really think of. And also, speaking of Friday the 13th the game, the flannel that Jason wears looks very similar to Kenny's flannel from that game. And I know the flannel is a iconic lumberjack clothing item, I know, but it does remind me of Kenny significantly. And speaking of like the look overall, the look, even though it doesn't look very close to the look from Part 2, it does remind me a little bit of Sackhead Jason. For our next one, we have Shovel Jason, and speaking of the shovel might be a reference to Part 9 because the protagonist from that movie was fighting Jason with the shovel, and then Jason took it and then smacked him in the face with it. So maybe it's a reference to that, I'm not quite sure though. But this cosmetic also has the gloves, which kind of reminds me of Part 6 and the worker gloves that Jason wears in those movies. And the look overall kind of reminds me of Part 7, Part 8 Jason, where he looks very slimy like Part 8, but he also has like the skeletal look from Part 7. And also, if you turn Jason around, you can see his spine peering through the flannel, very much like Part 7 Jason. And lastly, we have Coral Jason, which all I can really say about the skin is that it looks like Part 7. That's really all I got. It's got the chain around the neck. It looks like he's been underwater for a very long time. He's kind of got that skeleton look to him, but that's really about it. Other than that, I don't know why he's covered in coral. Coral is not a lake thing, or maybe it's algae, I don't know. Now let's get into all the spikes that Jason uses and throws throughout any given match in Dead by Daylight. And for the first one, we have the Oar, which doesn't really have a specific reference. It kind of just references Jason's character overall, like how he lives by the lakeside, Camp Crystal Lake, kayaks, all that kind of stuff. So the Oar doesn't have an exact reference, but it's a general reference to Jason Voorhees. But a spike that does have a specific reference, we have the stop sign from Jason Goes to Hell, where Jason takes a stop sign, sharpens it up a little bit, stabs it through a tent, and then cuts a girl in half. Next up, we have the graveyard fence post, which is a reference to Part 6, Jason Lives, which was the primary weapon that Jason used in that movie until he eventually did get the machete halfway through. You also have a shower curtain, which I didn't know exactly what this was referencing to, but I kind of came to the conclusion it was from Part 3 because there is a shower curtain that looks very similar to this one in that movie. And for the last spike, we have a car axle, which I don't know what this is referencing whatsoever. I mean, sure, Jason has used cars to kill people before, but he's never used an axle of all things, or at least that I can remember. So, I don't know, I think they just wanted something really long and hard to throw at people. That sounds very weird. Moving on to Jason's power, the Omnipresent Evil, and I understand the whole, disappearing and reappearing thing about it, the whole unconfirmed teleportation power that Jason does have. And I say it's unconfirmed because, we never see Jason teleport, but we know that he does it. So that part of the power I understand, but I don't understand the fog part. I've never understood why fog is somehow synonymous with Jason, because no movie in the franchise, except for maybe one, has like a heavy emphasis on fog. The only one I can think of is Freddy vs. Jason. That's it. But somehow fog is synonymous with Jason, and this is not the first time that that's happened. It actually happened like a decade earlier in NKX, where one of Jason's powers in that game is the ability to teleport across the map by disappearing and reappearing from a fog. So maybe the power is a reference to MKX, I don't know. And I guess it's also kind of a callback to one of Jason's powers from Friday the 13th, the game, with the shift ability, where he disappears and dashes forward really, really fast and then reappears after his dash. And for our final Easter egg with Jason in Dead by Daylight, we have the spear throw or the spike throw or whatever. And I was debating on putting this in the video at all because there's not really a time where Jason has ever thrown anything like a javelin or thrown a javelin-like weapon in the franchise, except one time. In Freddy vs. Jason, there's a point where somebody sets Jason on fire, he pulls out his machete, the guy is running away, and then Jason throws his machete like a javelin at the guy's back. So maybe his power is kind of a reference to that, but it is such an obscure reference that I don't really think that it actually is. I think it's just coincidence. But that is all the Easter eggs I have for Jason in Dead by Daylight. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if I missed anything or I misspoke or anything like that, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you next time.